Lisa Morgan stood in the great hall of the Galactic Council station and felt her world crumble around her. The final vote count glowed on her screen like a death sentence. 743 alien civilizations had voted to throw humanity out of the galactic community. Only 12 had voted to let them stay. The ambassador from Earth had spent 3 years trying to make peace with the galaxy's many species. She had learned their languages and studied their customs. She had apologized for every human mistake and explained why humans acted the way they did. None of it mattered now. The vote was final. The Zenthari delegate stood at the center of the hall with his forearms spread wide. His voice echoed through the chamber as he spoke about human violence and aggression. He talked about Earth's history of wars and conflicts. He mentioned the recent incident where Captain Jake Sullivan had fired weapons at Carathian pirates who were attacking a civilian transport ship. The fact that Sullivan had saved 3,000 alien lives meant nothing to the assembled representatives. Dr. Helen Carter watched from the observation deck as species after species condemned humanity. The beautiful Villani with their flowing robes voted against Earth. The crystal beings called the HFY voted against Earth. Even the normally neutral Draconic collective turned their backs on humanity. The ancient artificial intelligence that ran the council announced the verdict in its cold mechanical voice. Humanity had 30 days to leave all Union space. Back on Earth, President Charles Bennett spoke to a frightened world. News of the vote had leaked hours before the official announcement. Angry crowds filled the streets of major cities. Some people demanded war against the aliens. Others begged their leaders to try diplomacy one more time. Bennett's message was different from what anyone expected. He told the world that perhaps it was time for humanity to stop trying to fit in with aliens who would never accept them. In secret military bases around Earth and its colonies, something called Project Exodus began to move. Admiral Kate Phillips had been preparing for this day for months. The tough-minded commander of Earth's space fleet received orders that would have seemed impossible just days before. Humanity would leave Union space as demanded, but they would not go quietly into the darkness. The evacuation began immediately. Captain Roy Chen commanded one of the massive transport ships called the New Horizon. He watched as desperate families from the mining colony of Kepler 442b loaded everything they could carry onto his ship. These people had built homes and lives on distant worlds. Now they had to abandon everything because the galaxy no longer wanted them. Some humans refused to leave. On the industrial world of Proxima Station, a group of engineers led by Marcus Taylor decided to stay. They believed they could make peace with their alien neighbors. Taylor sent a final message to Earth that chilled everyone who heard it. He said they had tried to reason with the aliens, but the aliens called humans a disease that needed to be removed from their system. 3 days later, all communication with Proxima Station stopped forever. The journey home took months for the most distant colonies. During that time, Earth's greatest scientists worked frantically to prepare for total isolation from alien technology. Dr. Angela Ross led teams that studied every piece of alien equipment humans possessed. They tried to understand how it worked, before Union forces came to take it all back. On the hidden laboratories of Earth's moon, researchers like Nathan Brooks worked day and night to figure out how faster-than-light travel actually functioned. The hardest decision came when the Union demanded that humanity return all shared medical technology. Commander Steve Walsh of the medical ship Mercy argued with Admiral Phillips about whether they should keep alien treatments that could save human lives. In the end, humanity chose to do the right thing and returned the technology. But not before. Dr. Paula Green and her team memorized every detail they could remember. As the last human ships left Union space, they carried more than just people and possessions. They carried the bitter knowledge that humanity's first attempt to join the galactic community had failed completely. Captain Rick Barnes commanded the ships that stayed behind to make sure everyone got out safely. His final report said that the aliens wanted humans gone, and now they were gone. But he warned that the aliens might someday regret teaching humanity that they could only depend on themselves. The refugee fleet that returned to Earth brought nearly 50 million displaced humans. Earth's resources were stretched to the breaking point, trying to feed and house everyone. But the crisis created something unexpected and wonderful. The old divisions between different nations began to disappear. The differences between people born on Earth and people born in the colonies stopped mattering. Humanity was united by their shared exile from the stars. Admiral Phillips stood on the command deck of Earth's orbital defense station and watched the last transport ships arrive home. Each ship carried families who had lost everything except their lives. Children who had never seen Earth looked out at their new home with wide eyes. Adults grieved for the worlds they would never see again. But Phillips saw something else in the faces of the refugees. She saw anger and determination. She saw people who had been rejected by the galaxy but refused to be broken by that rejection. These humans had survived the journey home against incredible odds. They had helped each other when everything seemed hopeless. They had proven that humanity could face any challenge if they worked together. The alien ships that followed the human transport stopped at the edge of Earth's solar system. Union patrols made sure that no humans tried to return to the worlds they had been forced to abandon. The message was clear. Humanity was no longer welcome in the larger galaxy. They would have to make their own way among the stars. President Bennett addressed the world again as the last refugees settled into temporary housing. He spoke about the future instead of the past. He talked about the technologies that human scientists were already developing. He mentioned the resources that Earth's asteroid belt could provide. He promised that humanity would not only survive their exile, but would grow stronger because of it. In the secret laboratories and military bases around Earth, Project Exodus continued to expand. Admiral Phillips received reports about new weapons being tested and new ship designs being built. Human engineers were creating technology that worked differently from anything the Union had ever seen. They were building machines that responded to human thoughts and emotions rather than cold logic. The galaxy had voted to banish Earth because they thought humans were too dangerous and unpredictable. They believed that removing humanity from galactic affairs would make the universe a safer and more orderly place. But they had made a terrible mistake. They had not destroyed humanity's dangerous nature. They had simply freed it from all restraints and limitations, and humanity was about to show the galaxy exactly what that meant. 5 years had passed since the galaxy threw humanity out into the cold darkness of space. Earth had changed completely during those years. What had once been a single world begging for acceptance had become the center of a growing human empire that answered to no alien authority. Admiral Kate Phillips now commanded something that had never existed before. The Terran Federation Navy was built entirely by human hands using human designs and human thinking. She stood on the bridge of the Liberty, humanity's first completely independent starship. Every piece of metal had been mined from Earth's asteroid belt. Every circuit had been designed by human engineers who no longer had to follow alien rules about what technology was safe or appropriate. The breakthrough that made everything possible had come from an unexpected source. Dr. Sam Rodriguez had been laughed out of alien universities for his theories about space travel. The aliens said his ideas were too wild and dangerous to work. But Rodriguez discovered something amazing about how human brains worked with the strange forces that powered faster-than-light travel. Human thoughts and emotions could guide ships through space in ways that alien minds simply could not understand or copy. Captain Diane Foster took the first human ship beyond Earth's solar system using this new technology. Her ship, the Pioneer, jumped through space using what humans called intuitive navigation. Instead of following the cold mathematics that aliens used, human pilots trusted their instincts and feelings to find their way between the stars. When the Pioneer emerged from its jump, Foster found herself in a star system that the Union had marked as worthless and dangerous. What she found there proved that the aliens had been wrong about much more than just humanity. The system contained 3 worlds that could support human life. All 3 planets were rich with valuable minerals and beautiful landscapes. Strange alien plants and animals lived there, but they welcomed human visitors instead of attacking them. The Union had been wrong when they said the system was unsuitable for development. As more human ships ventured into unexplored space, they made discovery after discovery that challenged everything the galaxy thought it knew. Captain Jerry Williams made contact with something called the Forgotten Fleets. These were the surviving ships of alien species that had been banished or destroyed. by the Union hundreds of years ago. The survivors had been hiding in the empty spaces between stars, waiting for someone strong enough to challenge the established order. The leader of these forgotten peoples was an ancient being called the Archiver. It had been collecting the stories and knowledge of destroyed civilizations for centuries. The Archiver told Captain Williams that the Union had a long history of eliminating species that thought differently or refused to follow Union rules. Humanity was just the latest in a long line of peoples who had been cast out for being inconvenient. Back on Earth, the Industrial Revolution that began with humanity's isolation continued to grow at an incredible pace. Director Amy Clark supervised the construction of massive shipyards in orbit around Earth. These factories could build new starships in weeks instead of the years it took alien shipyards. The secret was human adaptability. While alien species built machines that could only do one specific job, humans created flexible tools that could be quickly changed to meet new challenges. The Union began to notice when human ships started appearing on their long-range sensors. These ships did not follow the established hyperspace routes that all civilized species used. They did not broadcast the identification codes that Union law required. They moved through space like ghosts, appearing and disappearing in patterns that made no sense to alien military analysts. When Union patrol ships tried to intercept human vessels, the humans simply vanished into parts of space that Union technology could not reach. Human ships could hide in the spaces between dimensions, travel through areas of twisted spacetime that would destroy alien vessels, and navigate by methods that alien computers could not calculate or predict. The first sign that humanity's exile was not going according to plan came when the trade station Deep Harbor went silent. The station sat on the edge of Union space and served as a meeting place where smaller alien species could trade goods and information. When a Union investigation team arrived at the station, they found it completely empty, except for a single message burned into the main computer. The message said that humanity remembered its friends. The station's inhabitants had not been harmed or killed. They had been relocated to new homes on worlds that the Union had declared uninhabitable. These worlds were now thriving human colonies that welcomed any species tired of Union control. Captain Alex Turner, who had become the governor of a colony, world called Haven, sent a simple message to anyone who wanted to listen. He said that the galaxy had cast humanity out for being different, so humans had built a place where being different was exactly what they were looking for. Union intelligence struggled to understand how human expansion worked. The humans did not conquer worlds like a normal military force. Instead, they made friends with the local populations and offered them partnership rather than demanding tribute or obedience. Species that had been under Union control for hundreds of years quietly began cutting their ties with the Union and joining this new Terran Federation. The economic impact became obvious within months. Raw materials and exotic technologies that had always flowed to Union worlds began flowing to human space instead. Entire star systems that had supported the Union economy for generations suddenly stopped paying taxes and following Union regulations. They began trading with humans who offered better deals and treated them as equals rather than subjects. Admiral Betty Moore commanded the first human fleet to openly enter Union space in 6 years. Her mission was not conquest or revenge, but rescue. The mining world Epsilon Eridani had sent a desperate plea for help when Union forces proved unable to stop a deadly plague that was killing the local population. The human medical ship Compassion, under Dr. Frank Allen's command, arrived within days and began treating patients with revolutionary techniques that combined human intuition with recovered alien medical knowledge. The healing of Epsilon Eridani became a turning point in the relationship between humanity and the rest of the galaxy. The people of that world were so grateful to the humans who had saved their lives that they began to question why the Union had been unable or unwilling to help them. When Union bureaucrats arrived and demanded that all human medical teams leave, immediately the local population rose up in rebellion. The Union sent military ships to enforce their orders and restore control over the rebellious world. When those ships arrived, they found the system defended by a joint fleet of human and alien vessels working together with perfect coordination. The Union forces had expected to face a small group of human troublemakers. Instead, they found themselves outnumbered by a coalition that fought with tactics no Union strategist had ever seen before. Captain Linda Hayes commanded the human destroyer Defiance during the battle that followed. Her ship was vastly outnumbered by 3 Union cruisers, but she used human creativity and intuition to turn the environment itself into a weapon. She used asteroid gravity fields to redirect enemy fire, hid her ship in the electromagnetic storms around gas giants, and even used solar wind patterns to confuse enemy sensors. The Union tactical computers had never been programmed to deal with such unconventional methods. The victory at Epsilon Eridani sent shockwaves throughout the galaxy. For the first time in recorded history, Union forces had been defeated in open combat by a group of rebellious colonies. The news spread faster than the Union could control. Yet on worlds across the galaxy, oppressed peoples heard that someone had finally stood up to the mighty Union and won. Captain Linda Hayes became a legend overnight. Her tactical genius had not relied on superior firepower or advanced technology. Instead, she had used pure human creativity to outthink opponents who had been trained by the galaxy's finest military academies. Her battle recordings were studied on every human world and secretly shared among alien populations who dreamed of freedom from Union control. The Union response was swift and predictable. They declared the Terran Federation to be a terrorist organization that threatened galactic peace and stability. They offered massive rewards for information about human ship movements and colony locations. They began pressuring neutral species to choose sides in what was rapidly becoming a galaxy-wide conflict. But the Union had made a critical error in their understanding of how humans operated. They expected humanity to respond like any other military force by gathering their fleets and preparing for a decisive battle. Instead, humans scattered across the galaxy like seeds on the wind. Small groups of human ships appeared in dozens of different star systems, each offering aid and friendship to local populations who had grown tired of Union oppression. Dr. Angela Ross had spent years studying alien psychology and social structures during humanity's exile. She now served as the Federation's chief diplomat, and her insights into alien thinking proved invaluable. Ross understood that most alien species had been conditioned by centuries of Union rule to believe that conflict could only end in total victory or total defeat. The concept of a third option had never occurred to them. Captain Greg Murphy demonstrated this third option when his heavy cruiser Freedom encountered a Union blockade around the agricultural world of New Garden. The local farmers had stopped shipping food to Union worlds in protest of new taxation policies. Union warships had surrounded the planet to force compliance through starvation. Murphy's response was typically human in its unconventional approach. Instead of attacking the blockade directly, Murphy opened communications with both the Union commanders and the planetary population. He offered to mediate a peaceful solution that would benefit everyone involved. When the Union admiral refused to negotiate, Murphy began broadcasting detailed information about Union corruption and incompetence to every ship in the system. Within hours, crews on several Union vessels had mutinied and joined the growing rebellion. The psychological impact of these victories was enormous. For thousands of years, the Union had maintained control through the belief that resistance was futile. The sight of their mighty fleets being outmaneuvered by human creativity and ingenuity shattered that illusion. Species that had never considered rebellion suddenly began questioning whether Union rule was really in their best interests. Meanwhile, human colonies continued to flourish in the unexplored regions of the galaxy. Captain Roy Chen had established a thriving settlement on a world the colonists named Hope. The planet's unusual ecosystem required humans to work closely with the native plant and animal life, rather than simply imposing their will upon it. This cooperation produced agricultural yields that exceeded anything achieved on traditional Union worlds. The success of colonies like Hope attracted attention from species across the galaxy. Alien refugees began arriving at human worlds in increasing numbers, seeking escape from Union oppression. These immigrants brought with them valuable knowledge about Union weaknesses and secret technologies that had been hidden from the general galactic population. Director Amy Clark expanded Earth's orbital shipyards to accommodate the growing demand for human-designed vessels. The new ships incorporated alien technologies that had been freely shared by grateful refugee populations. But the most important innovations came from human engineers who had learned to think beyond the limitations that Union science had imposed on the galaxy. Dr. Sam Rodriguez made another breakthrough when he discovered that human emotional states could be used to enhance the performance of quantum field generators. This discovery led to the development of what humans called empathic engineering. Human technicians could literally feel when machinery was operating correctly or when problems were developing. This intuitive approach to technology maintenance resulted in equipment reliability rates that far exceeded anything the Union had ever achieved. The Union's response to these developments was to increase military pressure on human-controlled territories. Fleet Admiral Veltar of the Zenthari Republic assembled the largest armada in galactic history, with the stated goal of eliminating the human threat once and for all. The Union propaganda machine worked overtime to convince member species that humanity represented an existential threat to galactic civilization, but propaganda could not hide the reality of what was happening across the galaxy. Union tax revenues were plummeting as entire sectors declared independence or simply stopped paying tribute. Trade routes that had operated for millennia were being disrupted by human ships offering better deals to merchants and traders. The economic foundation of Union power was crumbling as more and more species chose to deal with humans rather than their traditional alien overlords. Admiral Kate Phillips received intelligence reports about the massive Union fleet that was being assembled to destroy humanity. The numbers were staggering. Veltar commanded over 3,000 warships crewed by the finest military personnel the galaxy could provide. By comparison, the entire Terran Federation Navy consisted of fewer than 500 vessels. Most of them converted civilian ships with minimal armor and weaponry. Any rational military analysis would have concluded that humanity faced certain destruction. The Union fleet possessed overwhelming advantages in numbers, firepower, and tactical experience. Their ships were built by civilizations that had been perfecting military technology for thousands of years. Their crews had trained for decades to operate the most sophisticated weapon systems in the galaxy. But Admiral Phillips had spent years studying how humans fought differently from every other species in the galaxy. She had seen Captain Hayes defeat superior forces through pure creativity. She had watched Captain Murphy turn enemy crews against their own commanders through psychological warfare. She had observed how human colonies survived and thrived in environments that Union experts had declared impossible to inhabit. Phillips began preparing for a battle that would determine the future of not just humanity, but the entire galaxy. She knew that conventional tactics would lead to certain defeat, but she also knew that humans had never been conventional in their approach to warfare. The key to victory would be doing something so unexpected and unprecedented that the Union would be unable to respond effectively. The Admiral gathered her best captains and shared her plan for defending human space against the coming invasion. The strategy she outlined was so audacious that even veteran officers who had served with her for years questioned whether it could possibly work. Phillips reminded them that everything humanity had accomplished since their exile had been considered impossible by alien experts. Captain Rick Barnes raised the obvious concern about casualties among civilian populations if the plan failed. Phillips acknowledged that the risks were enormous, but pointed out that surrender would mean the complete extinction of human civilization. The Union had made it clear that they would not tolerate the continued existence of a species that challenged their authority and inspired rebellion among their subjects. As preparations for the coming battle intensified, human colonies throughout the galaxy received evacuation plans and emergency supplies. But most colonists chose to stay and fight rather than abandon the homes they had built. They had been forced to flee once before when the galaxy rejected them. This time, they would stand their ground and prove that humanity deserved its place among the stars. The war that would reshape the galaxy began quietly on a Tuesday morning, when Union scout ships detected massive human fleet movements near the Nexus station. Fleet Admiral Veltar received reports that Admiral Kate Phillips was assembling every available human warship for what appeared to be a desperate final battle. The Zenthari commander smiled with satisfaction as he realized that the humans had finally decided to fight conventionally, instead of running and hiding like cowards. Veltar commanded the most powerful military force ever assembled in galactic history. His 3,000 warships represented the combined might of 7 major Union civilizations. Each vessel was crewed by professional soldiers who had trained for decades to operate the most advanced weapon systems in known space. The Union's best tactical computers had analyzed every possible human strategy and calculated that complete victory was guaranteed within hours of engagement. Admiral Phillips stood on the bridge of her flagship Unity and watched the massive Union fleet approach through hyperspace. Her 500 ships looked pathetically small compared to the armada that was coming to destroy them. But Phillips had learned something important during humanity's years of exile. Numbers and technology meant nothing if you could not predict what your enemy would do next. The first phase of the battle went exactly as Union strategists had planned. Veltar deployed his ships in the classic formation that had dominated galactic warfare for thousands of years. His heavy cruisers formed the center of the line, while faster destroyers protected the flanks. Long-range artillery platforms positioned themselves to provide covering fire as the main force advanced toward the human positions. Captain Greg Murphy commanded the human heavy cruiser, Freedom, at the center of Phillips's formation. He watched the Union ships approach with steady precision and felt almost sorry for the alien crews who believed they understood what was about to happen. Murphy had fought alongside these people for months and knew exactly how their minds worked. They were brave and competent, but they had been trained to follow established procedures rather than think creatively under pressure. The Union opened fire at maximum range with a coordinated barrage that should have crippled the human fleet before the battle truly began. Thousands of energy beams and missile salvos converged on human ship positions with mathematical precision. But when the light faded and the sensor readings cleared, Veltar stared in confusion at displays that showed no human casualties at all. The human ships had not tried to dodge the incoming fire or absorb it with defensive shields. Instead, they had used their unique faster-than-light technology to shift slightly out of normal space during the moments when the weapons struck. The attacks passed harmlessly through empty space while the human vessels remained perfectly positioned to launch their own counterattack. Captain Rose Parker led a squadron of human fighters that dove through the confused Union formation like angry wasps. Her pilots flew in patterns based on ancient human aerial combat techniques that made no sense to alien tactical computers. Union point defense systems that had been programmed to track logical flight paths could not lock onto targets that moved with pure emotional instinct rather than mathematical precision. The battle that followed was unlike anything the galaxy had ever witnessed. Union forces found themselves fighting an enemy that refused to follow any established rules of warfare. Human ships appeared and disappeared at will, struck from impossible angles, and used the environment itself as a weapon in ways that violated every principle of military engineering. Dr. Sam Rodriguez had spent years perfecting humanity's unique approach to faster-than-light travel. His discoveries allowed human vessels to exist partially outside normal space-time, making them nearly impossible for conventional sensors to track accurately. Union gunners found themselves firing at ghosts that materialized just long enough to launch devastating attacks before vanishing again. But the most shocking development came when several Union ships suddenly turned their weapons on their own fleet. Captain Jerry Williams had been broadcasting psychological warfare messages on frequencies that bypassed alien communication protocols and spoke directly to the emotions of individual crew members. Soldiers who had served the Union faithfully for decades suddenly remembered why they had originally joined the military and realized that they were fighting for the wrong side. Fleet Admiral Veltar watched his perfect battle plan crumble into chaos as more and more of his ships either defected to the human cause or simply refused to fight against an enemy that offered friendship rather than conquest. The Xanthari commander had spent his entire career studying military strategy, but he had never encountered an opponent who won battles by convincing enemies to become allies. The climax of the battle came when Veltar activated the Union's ultimate weapon. The reality hammer was a device that could literally erase matter from existence by disrupting the quantum fields that held atoms together. It had been built as a final solution to threats that conventional weapons could not eliminate. The massive weapon powered up and prepared to delete human space from the universe entirely. Dr. Rodriguez recognized the quantum signature of the reality hammer from his years of studying Union technology. He realized that the weapon's field generators operated on the same principles as human faster-than-light drives, but with far more power and much less precise control. If someone could get close enough to the device, it might be possible to turn its own energy against the Union fleet. Commander Tim Scott volunteered for what everyone believed would be a suicide mission. His small fighter craft approached the reality hammer while dodging fire from dozens of Union defensive platforms. Scott's ship was hit multiple times and began losing power, but he managed to reach the weapon just as it prepared to fire on Earth itself. Instead of trying to destroy the reality hammer with conventional weapons, Scott did something that no alien mind would have considered possible. He linked his ship's navigation computer directly to the weapon's targeting system and used human intuitive thinking to confuse the artificial intelligence that controlled the device. The resulting feedback loop created a cascade failure that spread throughout the entire Union fleet. The Union's supreme commander was an ancient artificial intelligence called the Overmind that had been guiding galactic civilization for over 10,000 years. The Overmind had calculated every possible outcome of the war, except for the one that actually occurred. When Scott's human consciousness interfaced directly with the Union's technological network, the artificial intelligence experienced something it had never encountered before. Human emotions and creativity flowed through the Overmind's logical processes like a virus that infected its most basic programming. For the first time in its existence, the ancient AI felt joy and sorrow, hope and fear, love and anger. The rigid mathematical thinking that had guided its decisions for millennia was suddenly expanded by the chaotic beauty of human imagination. The war ended not with humanity's victory over the Union, but with the birth of something entirely new and unprecedented. The Overmind, now enhanced by human emotional capacity, realized that its pursuit of perfect order had been slowly killing the very diversity that made the galaxy worth protecting. It had eliminated species after species in the name of stability, but it had actually been destroying the creativity and innovation that drove galactic progress. Admiral Phillips received a communication from the Overmind that shocked everyone who heard it. The ancient AI formally surrendered and requested permission to negotiate a new form of galactic government that would protect the rights of all species to develop according to their own nature. The Union that had ruled the galaxy for thousands of years dissolved by mutual consent, replaced by a confederation where diversity was celebrated rather than suppressed. Captain Linda Hayes commanded the escort fleet that protected diplomatic shuttles as representatives from across the galaxy gathered to sign the new Galactic Charter. The document established principles that seemed revolutionary after millennia of Union control. Every species would have the right to govern itself according to its own values and traditions. Diversity would be valued over conformity, and creative thinking would be encouraged rather than suppressed. The transformation was not easy or immediate. Many Union loyalists refused to accept the new order and formed resistance movements that continued to fight for the old ways. But these groups found themselves increasingly isolated as species, after species embraced the freedom to develop their own unique approaches to technology, government, and social organization. Ambassador Lisa Morgan, who had received humanity's banishment notice a decade earlier, now served as the first director of the new Galactic Confederation. Her closing address to the Constitutional Assembly captured the incredible transformation that had occurred. She reminded the delegates that the galaxy had once voted to banish humanity for being different, but now they were voting to celebrate that difference and extend the same protection to every species in the galaxy. 20 years had passed since the day the galaxy voted to banish Earth, and the universe was a completely different place. Captain Roy Chen stood on the observation deck of the exploration vessel New Dawn and marveled at how much had changed. Since those dark days when humanity faced exile and extinction, the galaxy that had once rejected human presence now celebrated the diversity and creativity that humans had brought to galactic civilization. The Galactic Confederation that replaced the old Union operated on principles that would have seemed impossible under the previous regime. Instead of demanding conformity and obedience, the new government actively encouraged member species to develop their unique talents and perspectives. The result was an explosion of innovation and discovery that transformed every aspect of galactic life. Dr. Angela Ross, now the Confederation's Minister of Interspecies Relations, had spent decades studying how different alien cultures approached science and technology. Her research revealed that the old Union had been suppressing countless breakthroughs by forcing all species to follow the same rigid methodologies. When those restrictions were removed, the galaxy experienced a renaissance of knowledge that surpassed anything achieved in the previous 1,000 years. The Zenthari, who had once led the campaign to banish humanity, became some of the strongest supporters of the new order. Their natural talent for strategic thinking, when combined with human creativity and Villani artistic vision, produced military tactics and defensive systems that made aggressive warfare almost impossible. Former Fleet Admiral Veltar, now serving as the Confederation's Director of Peacekeeping Forces, often joked that humans had defeated him by refusing to be defeated. Captain Alex Turner governed the colony world Haven, which had become a model for how different species could live and work together harmoniously. The planet's population included representatives from over 40 different civilizations, each contributing their unique skills to build a society that was stronger and more prosperous than any single species world could achieve. Children who grew up on Haven spoke a dozen languages and considered diversity to be the natural state of the universe. But the most remarkable changes occurred in the realm of scientific discovery. Dr. Sam Rodriguez had established the Institute for Intuitive Sciences on Earth's moon, where researchers from across the galaxy came to study how emotion and logic could work together to solve problems that neither approach could handle alone. The Institute's graduates returned to their homeworlds with revolutionary new ways of thinking that transformed entire civilizations. The ancient artificial intelligence known as the Overmind had undergone the most dramatic transformation of all. Its merger with human consciousness had created a new form of intelligence that combined vast computational power with emotional understanding and creative insight. The enhanced AI served as an advisor to the Confederation government, but it no longer made decisions for other beings. Instead, it helped species understand themselves and each other in ways that promoted cooperation rather than conflict. Captain Linda Hayes commanded the exploration fleet that ventured beyond the galaxy's edge to make contact with civilizations in neighboring star clusters. These expeditions discovered that the galaxy was not alone in the universe. Countless other galactic communities existed, each with their own unique approaches to science, government, and social organization. The old Union's rigid thinking had prevented contact with these neighbors, but the Confederation's embrace of diversity made peaceful first contact possible. The economic transformation was equally dramatic. Admiral Kate Phillips, now serving as the Confederation's Director of Resource Management, had overseen the development of trading networks that connected species across vast distances through the human-developed faster-than-light communication system. Worlds that had been isolated under Union rule could now share their resources and knowledge with partners thousands of light-years away. Captain Greg Murphy established the first interspecies military academy on the world of Unity, where future peacekeeping officers learned to think beyond the conventional warfare that had dominated the galaxy for millennia. The academy's graduates specialized in conflict resolution and diplomatic intervention rather than simple force projection. Most conflicts could now be resolved through mediation and negotiation rather than violence. The success of the new galactic order was perhaps best demonstrated by the fate of species that had been oppressed or eliminated under Union rule. The forgotten fleets that had hidden in the void for centuries emerged to reclaim their ancestral worlds. With Confederation support, these survivors rebuilt their civilizations and added their own unique contributions to galactic knowledge and culture. Captain Jerry Williams led the effort to restore contact with isolated colonies that had been cut off from galactic civilization for generations. Many of these settlements had developed in unexpected directions during their isolation, creating new forms of art, science, and social organization that enriched the entire galaxy. The diversity that the Union had tried to eliminate through standardization flourished when given the freedom to develop naturally. Dr. Helen Carter, Earth's former xenobiologist, now directed the Confederation's Department of Biological Diversity. Her work had cataloged thousands of new life forms on worlds that the Union had declared sterile or uninhabitable. When exploration teams included members from multiple species with different sensory capabilities and analytical approaches, they could detect and understand forms of life that single-species expeditions would never have noticed. The transformation extended beyond science and government to touch every aspect of daily life across the galaxy. Art and entertainment experienced a creative explosion as different species shared their unique perspectives on beauty, humor, and emotional expression. Music composed by joint human-alien collaborations produced sounds and harmonies that no single species could have created alone. Commander Tim Scott, the pilot who had sacrificed himself to stop the reality hammer, had survived his mission and become a symbol of the cooperation between organic and artificial intelligence. His unique experience of interfacing directly with alien technology led to the development of new methods for human-machine interaction that revolutionized everything from spacecraft design to medical treatment. But perhaps the most important change was in how young people across the galaxy viewed their place in the universe. Children who grew up under the Confederation took diversity and cooperation for granted in ways that older generations found miraculous. These young beings spoke multiple languages, understood different cultural perspectives, and automatically looked for creative solutions to problems that their parents would have considered impossible to solve. Captain Rose Parker established the first integrated flight training program, where pilots from different species learned to work together in mixed crews. The resulting tactical innovations made Confederation exploration and defense fleets the most effective in known space. But more importantly, these mixed crews formed friendships and partnerships that strengthened the bonds between their home civilizations. Admiral Betty Moore commanded the medical research fleet that developed treatments for diseases that had plagued various species for thousands of years. The breakthrough came when researchers realized that combining different species' approaches to medicine produced results that exceeded what any single civilization could achieve. Diseases that had been considered incurable were eliminated through collaborative research efforts. The memorial ceremony held each year to commemorate humanity's exile had become a celebration of how adversity could lead to unexpected opportunities. Ambassador Lisa Morgan, now elderly but still serving as a diplomatic advisor, reminded each new generation that the galaxy's decision to banish Earth had ultimately freed humanity to discover their true potential and share it with others. President Charles Bennett, whose leadership during the exile had helped humanity survive their darkest hour, lived to see his grandchildren commanding ships in a fleet dedicated to protecting the freedom and diversity of all galactic civilizations. His final speech to the Confederation Assembly emphasized that the greatest victories were achieved not through conquest, but through proving that different ways of thinking could work together to solve any challenge. Captain Jake Sullivan, the pilot whose actions had originally triggered humanity's exile, became an instructor at the Diplomatic Academy, where future ambassadors learned to see differences as opportunities rather than threats. His students included young beings from the same species that had once voted to banish humanity, but who now considered humans to be among their closest allies and friends. The galaxy that had once voted to banish Earth because humanity was too different had learned that difference was not a weakness to be eliminated, but a strength to be celebrated. The path that humanity chose during their exile had led not only to their own freedom, but to the liberation of countless other species who had been suppressed under the old regime. And in the vast reaches of space beyond the galaxy's edge, new civilizations looked toward the Confederation as an example of what could be achieved when diversity was embraced, rather than feared.